This is Patrick Russell. I'm interviewing George Shenkle for the first time. This interview is taking place on October the 18th, 2014 in Dallas, Texas. This interview is being conducted by the Making History Project for a project named War and Peace, Memories from World War II. George, why don't you tell me where you were born?
I was born in Woodbury, New Jersey.
And how big of a family did you have?
Well, I was the first of the children anyway. I settled in a small town south of Woodbury, Winona, which goes back to Hiawatha's time, but a small town. In fact, Dad was a graduate of Winona Military Academy, and much to his disappointment, although he graduated from a military academy because of his poor eyesight, was not accepted into the military, and this is in World War I. So that's when I enlisted into the Army when I was turning 21. It was the first thing I did as an adult. I enlisted in the service. I did not tell any of the family in what branch I was going, but I was so impressed by Joe Chadwick, a foreman of the company, in the company that I worked. And Joe was the first paratrooper I ever saw, but I felt if I could make it in that would be a goal that I will have achieved. It's like today's. I mean, you have admiration for soldiers. And first paratrooper I saw, and then I figured if I could make it in that branch, that would prove to my father that I could do something meaningful. I always felt a disappointment to my father because I never attained the stature or prominence that my dad had. And I always felt he was disappointed in what I did, but I figured if I could make it in the paratroops, it would make my dad very proud. Of course, it was an emotional thing for him not to know what branch I was going into. But I have the small note that I sent to Mother. I said, and this was coming Indiantown Gap. I enlisted in Philadelphia and was sent up to Indiantown Gap to be assigned to a regiment. Well, I have the note. Don't bother writing. I won't be here that long. And this is the first clue that anybody in the family had as to what branch of the service I was going into. I've joined the paratroops, and this hit my father like a ton of bricks, because Dad and I were never close, but here, actually, I guess it was a sort of a sign of rebellion against the dominance of my father, that I was going to do something on my own. Dad rode the bus all the way from Pennsylvania to Florida to say goodbye. And whether or not I could have gotten off, I don't know, but I looked upon it as a way I was getting away from my father's dominance. It may or may not have been true, but that's the way I felt. Because seeing Joe Chadwick, and if I could make that up, boy, that proved to Dad and everyone else that I could really do something meaningful. That's the honor that comes with being a paratrooper.
So you joined when you were 21.
Yes.
When were you born?
In October 13, 1921.
Okay. And what did your father do?
My father, he was a graduate of Winona Military Academy, and when he went there, they offered him as an instructor. But he was infatuated with the woman that became my mother, who happened to live next door to the academy. Her father was the mayor of the town, and so Dad and she, well, they dated, and actually then they were actually married. Now Dad was 26, and Mother was 19, and really it was well, it was. I don't know. They loved each other, really, but.
What were you doing before the war?
Before the war, well, I graduated from high school. I was 17 years old. And back then, and this was 1939, June 1939, and you couldn't get a job until you were 18. Okay, I falsified my age for 1 month, and I was hired by Ellenwood Steel Company. It was probably through the efforts of my father that I was hired, but I started down in the mold yard, which is a place to store ingots and molds and so forth. But I accepted every job that was offered because I was glad to have a job.
Is it a steel company?
Ellenwood Steel Company, yes, it was a steel company that was originally formed in 1826, and it was a fully integrated steel company. They had their own coke plant, they had their own blast furnace, and had their own open hours. Very fully integrated, and they were in the American steel industry, a small, fully integrated company.
Do you recall what you were doing on Pearl Harbor Day?
Pearl Harbor Day, I remember, I think as I remember, and I could be wrong in this, I think it was a Sunday, as I remember. I remember I belonged to a men's chorus, and were putting on a Sunday afternoon performance, and I remember being shocked by the news that Pearl Harbor had been hit. Well, it shook everybody in the country, but it woke America up, because America's always felt very safe with two large oceans to protect them. But the rest of the world was gone to the dogs, and finally we were involved in the thing.
Do you recall when you enlisted, when you were 21, what year was that?
Well, I was born in 1921. So that would have been 42. So 42. I remember being sent from the Indiantown Gap and sent down to Florida, and there was a regiment being formed. It was the 508 Parachute Infantry Regiment, and they were down in Blanding, Camp Blanding, Florida, and we were a unique organization. All through, we had our basic training in Florida. We were moved up to Benning for the jump training. We did Tennessee maneuvers as a group. We did South Carolina maneuvers. And then we were eventually moved over to Camp Shanks. And in December of that year, we were moved to Northern Ireland by a 10-day trip by boat to Northern Ireland, getting ready for what later became D-Day.
Do you recall how you were shipped over to Ireland?
Yes, back then, I think we were shipped in a large convoy of merchant ships. Many of them were Liberty ships. But we assembled, and it was toward the end of we landed in Northern Ireland, were taken out to the town of Portrush and Port Stewart, We spent several months in Northern Ireland. Were transferred over to Scotland, put on the train, and ended up in Nottingham, which was the home of Robin Hood. And that then became our home away from home. And they always treated us well. And that's why we always regarded it as our home away from home.
How was the parachute training?
The parachute training was very, very vigorous. It was vigorous on purpose, because although the Germans had given up on the idea of paratroopers, America picked it up. And actually, by the time that we got into the war, D-Day, we had two airborne divisions, the 82nd Airborne and the 101st. Now, we gave the impression to the enemy that we had much more strength than we actually had. There were actually 5 non-existent divisions that existed, that just the patches existed, but the divisions did not. So with the cooperation of General Patton, who was to lead what the Germans believed to be the real invasion. Normandy is a diversion. The real invasion will come at the Pas-de-Calais. So there were 45 non-existent infantry divisions assembled up there, and this enabled to give the illusion that the real invasion will come at the Pas-de-Calais.
Did you do any training while overseas?
Well, yes, I think we probably had, actually my total number of jumps, I had a total of 16. I remember the first 5 were to qualify. Actually, there were 2 in combat, Normandy and Holland, and I don't remember exactly where the others were. I think we had practice jump in England, but getting ready. I jumped the jumps that I was required. I always felt fortunate in never being first nor last in the stick. You didn't have any choice, because when they cut the engines and the plane starts to nose down, you fight an uphill battle to get at the door. It is really dangerous. Of course, being first, neither first nor last, you had somebody pushing. And all of a sudden you realize you're out there and the ground is coming up.
Mm-hmm. So you belong to E Company of the 508th
Yes.
Parachute Infantry Regiment.
Although E Company was not the first company I was assigned to. I was assigned to, when we were put together in Blanding, to the 2nd Battalion Regimental Headquarters. Now, I was assigned to the 81 millimeter mortar, and that is a very awkward weapon to carry, particularly the barrel. You carried it like a rifle, but it was really, I had not flunked out of anything, but apparently it was determined that I was not bulky enough to carry that rifle. So I was transferred over to E Company, a rifle company. And when I got over there was a Sergeant Bob O'Connor who took me in and trained me as a radio operator. And that was what I was for the rest of the time I was with the outfit.
So you were working with communications.
Yes, I had gotten into that. I was always interested in communications. I was assigned to be the radio operator for the lieutenant who was in charge of these, not only the squad, but the battalion, whatever.
What other type of equipment or weapons were you qualified on?
Well, I don't know. I don't remember exactly. We got qualified on an M1, the ground rifle. I really, okay. Actually, I ended up, although I picked up a Tommy gun, uh, it provides an awful lot of firepower, and I really ended up removing the stock because it was easier to carry the thing that way. It gives you a lot of firepower. And being a radio operator, actually, I never really took the job of being a soldier that serious. Being a soldier and killing, no, I really, my job was really not to kill, but to be a radio operator. So without realizing it, I found that I was basically a conscientious objector.
Did you, in fact, participate in any invasions in your service?
Well, yes, actually, we were getting ready for what later became known as D-Day, and actually, because of that name, it is known as D-Day. Although each one of these invasions had its D-Day. It was D-Day each hour, but this was D-Day. So that the one in Normandy became known as D-Day, and it's known all the world over as D-Day. So although there are still some of us around, we're there, and I'm 93 now, but I was, well, in D-Day I was, well, let's see, 44, I was, 23. So, and okay, I forget whatever you had asked.
So you participated in D-Day?
In D-Day, yes.
And
okay.
Did you jump on the first day?
Yes, in fact, it was the early morning of the first day. It was about 2:00 in the morning, and the invasion had really not started. It started until about 6:00, but they dropped the parachute regiments. There were 2 divisions. They dropped us. And we were assigned the job of securing the bridgeheads, one at Lafayette and one at Chaptupont. And this was to protect the beachhead, the Utah beachhead, which ended up not like Omaha, which everyone who's ever seen The Longest Day knows Omaha. But Utah was a very successful airborne operation, because I think that they probably lost as few as 700 casualties, not like Omaha, but it was the job of the airborne divisions to capture the two bridgeheads there. Our regiment, most of it was dropped on the incorrect side of the Murray River. I was a member of what became known as the Lost Battalion. And it became the job of the Colonel Shanley to assemble people on Hill 30. Hill 30 became a focal point, and there were actually it took a while to get enough people together so you could operate as a military unit. But we were assembled there, and that was where we finally really didn't know how this invasion thing was going. And it was when I saw, coming through the bushes, when I saw Jim Gavin. Jim Gavin was the commander of the 82nd, when he instilled such a sense of confidence in his men that when you saw him, you knew the thing was going to work. There was no way it was not going to work. And he demonstrated this in Sicily. The drop into Sicily was not a good airborne operation. A good many of the people were dropped into the Mediterranean. So that although in spite of that, through the efforts of Jim Gavin, we became a relatively successful airborne operation, but it was through the efforts of leaders like Jim Gavin, and there was not a member in the division that did not revere Jim Gavin. We had the feeling that Gavin could walk on water. This is the feeling that you had. Feeling that the people in the South, the Civil War, having Robert E. Lee, feeling of confidence, the feeling that people in France had with Napoleon. Give me enough ribbon and I'll conquer the world. Mm-hmm. And this is unfortunately, it turned out that since, as the result of the Versailles Treaty, that America did not join, and so the humiliation of defeat was heaped on the German heads, and they were defeated, and this clown that came along with this bunch of rowdies stirred the population and gave them hope, and this is what they were looking for. And with this hope, unfortunately, it overran all of Europe.
And the clown you're talking about is Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was able. He had a way of influencing people with his voice. He influenced the people of Germany, and was able to gain control over the country, and they could actually. The German army works different than the American army, because without the Fuhrer's instructions or command, they wouldn't do anything. This isn't the American army. A good bit of the activity is done by the non-commissioned officers. The non-commissioned officers are the ones. Yes, there were officers, but it was the non-commissioned officers. It was the first sergeants and the buck sergeants, and that really, they were used to playing cowboys and Indians, and so that's what we were. And it was through the efforts of the non-commissioned officers. Yes, regular officers, yes, they did play a part, but really, when you didn't know what to do, you turned to your non-commissioned officer to tell you what to do. A lot of respect to non-commissioned officers.
So when you landed on French soil on June 6,
Yes.
1944,
Yes.
Where did you land? Did you land in a field or?
Well, I landed, and I have since, through the efforts of Adam Berry, who was put together in a biography of myself, he is able to trace back to the exact small pasture area surrounded by hedgerows, and traced it from there to the field where there were about 200 of us sitting around, not knowing what to do. And it was there that Colonel Shanley picked us up and led us to Hill 30, where we were able to eventually assemble enough people so that we could go on and work as an army unit. But it was one of the prime examples of this disarray. Colonel Mendez, who was the commander of the 3rd Battalion, was dumped up around Cherbourg, and it took him 3 days to getting through all the lines to get the airborne operation in Normandy was I don't know. There was only one really successful airborne operation in the whole European theater, and that was the final one to jump across the Rhine. But there was something wrong. Sicily they didn't want to, there was such a disaster. And yet General Bradley says, I need the airborne, and he did need. And because of the 2 divisions that we did have, the Utah beachhead was a success, And eventually, America wins by an overwhelming mass of numbers. We had been the arsenal of democracy. America was, by a large ocean, we felt very safe until we were brought into it by the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. That brought us into the war. But there were countries in Europe fight wars differently. They don't. No. America does not know how to lose. America does not know how to lose now, and this was demonstrated so well when the soldiers who were doing just what they were asked to do, and Vietnam was one of the things that they were asked to do, and half of the country was not in favor of it. And the soldiers that were sent to Vietnam, when they came home, they were spat on by the people. They were shown utter disrespect. And this eventually was overcome. But it's like the African invasion. Yes, Kasserine Pass was a disgrace. And the British soldiers who had been in war for 4 years didn't have much respect for American soldiers because of the disaster at Kasserine Pass. We were newcomers, but I think that the African invade thing was I think it was for the longest time that it was the American idea of attack across the channel. But I think Churchill, who was brought in after Chamberlain resigned, brought in to save his country, and he inspired the country. And there's people like this that the populists look for. They look for support, and it's people like this that lend support. So we came to admire Churchill. Yeah, he was a difficult man. De Gaulle was a difficult man. But these are prima donnas. And you can't win a war without a few prima donnas. And that was what many of the Airborne became prima donnas.
So you get assembled eventually in that field.
Yeah.
And were you able to regroup with a lot of the same guys that jumped out of the same plane with you? Or were you scattered all over?
No, I never saw Lieutenant Hedlund, who was the jump master. After I left the plane, I never saw him. And I was supposed to be attached to him with a radio. I wasn't attached to anybody, but I never saw his main phrase to the enlisted men: piss and moan, piss and moan. That's all you ever do, piss and moan. But that was his favorite phrase. But Eugene Hedlund, and I never saw him after that. So really, after a while, I discarded this radio, which anyway, I picked up a Tommy gun along the way. And I don't know, I don't know, well, you know, it's funny how many things come back now. This was 1944, and I'm 93 now, and geez, that was a long time ago, but so many of those things happened that just like they happened yesterday. Things like that, they're engraved on your mind. They're terrifying, yes, but I never felt a feeling of despair or fear. I don't know. We had officers and non-commissioned officers that instilled a sense of confidence. I don't know. Very few of. I don't know. I remember Jimmy Martin always claimed he'd never go into combat, and he shot himself in the foot to get out of combat. But he claimed he'd never go to combat, and he didn't because he shot himself. But this has happened, if you, I don't know, people do things that they don't know that they can. You never know what you can do until you have to. You never know. Most of the Medal of Honor winners, they didn't know that what they could do until they had to. I mean, we had one Medal of Honor winner, Sergeant Funk, who what he was doing was interpreted as a sign of surrender. As he raised the Tommy gun, it was interpreted he was surrendering, but he wiped out the opposition and retook and for this, he was awarded, he was our single Medal of Honor winner for this action. But if you go into war with the idea that you will never be taken prisoner, you're willing to bet your life, and you face things differently. People that are taken prisoner, they become prisoners of war, and what they do is they beg, don't kill me, please. We were fortunate in Normandy that many of the soldiers that we faced were wearing German uniforms, yes, but they were from countries that had been overrun by Germans, and the Germans were faced with the Atlantic Wall, so that Normandy was defended by people that were, all they wanted to do was surrender. So if they could get past our front line, they were safe. I mean, they were a prisoner of war. I mean, I liken myself to, okay, I was never close to being a prisoner of war, and I don't know how I would have reacted had I been, but I liken myself to the fact that today, and it's been for some time, that men do not take the topic of rape as serious as they should, because rape to a woman is they're pleading, please don't rape me. And this is the feeling that prisoners of war get from their enemy, please don't kill me. Women that have been raped, they know what it is. Women have been raped against their will. So that those that have been taken prisoner understand. They can understand what women go through. And that's just the way I feel.
When you mentioned earlier, you never know what you can do until you do it.
Yeah.
Previous to this, you were training to work as a radio operator.
Yeah.
You jump. You never see the officer you're supposed to serve with anymore.
Yes.
So now you ditch your radio, and now you're doing something different, right?
Well, yeah, I guess, I don't know. I remember when we came off of Hill 30, we finally got enough people together when we saw Gavin come across and Colonel Lundquist come across the causeway there, and we finally had enough people together where we could operate as an Army unit. And it was then became the idea, because everything that was coming across on the beaches, and it was a very expensive operation, and we had to seize a good port, and Cherbourg had to be taken. But before it could be taken, we had to seal off the peninsula, and that became our objective. We captured the town of, Bopte or Boopt, which was a munitions dump, overran that, and later then moved on and captured Hill 95, which overlooked. We sealed the peninsula off so that they could go up and capture the port of Cherbourg, but it was necessary to get a port so you could bring in ships, because everything was coming across the the beaches, except the one thing, Pluto, underwater pipeline carrying gasoline underwater from England to France, which was, in spite of that, it took a while to get that thing underway. But and the Red Ball Express delivering, it was delivering gasoline. Mm-hmm. Gasoline was, because the mileage that the tanks get is not very great. And they're burning up gasoline like mad. Takes a lot of gasoline to run a war.
So what did you end up doing instead of operating a radio from that point forward?
Well, I'd say, I don't know, I guess I served as a scout, I suppose, I guess. I don't know, I remember just before our attack on Boot or Bopte, we always call it Bopte, and the French call it Boot, whatever. But Colonel Shanley had warned us against booby traps, and he was the first one hit by a booby trap.
Really?
Now, yes, he was our battalion commander, and hit by a booby trap. Well, we lost him. Later on, in our attack on Hill 95, where General Gavin had brought Colonel Alexander over, because they apparently they didn't have the highest rank. We had Chet Graham, who was a captain, and it was necessary to seize this Hill 95, and so it was Captain Graham that enabled us to do it. But they had brought Colonel Alexander over from another one of the divisions. And I was standing next to the colonel when they were lobbing artillery shells into the trees above us. And there was another enlisted man on the other side of Colonel Alexander, and he was hit by shrapnel that came from this. It went through his chest and opened a wound, and he put him out of action. Here, he was the second of our battalion commanders we had lost. Actually, in that attack, we had three different commanders. We lost Shanley, we lost Alexander, and Chet Graham was the guy that got us through. But it was successful, and it actually ended up being the final operation of the 508, because we had gotten down to the point where we didn't have enough people left. We had less than half of the people we started with, and we had to be taken back, so we were taken back to Utah Beach and taken back to England to get ready for the next operation, which ended up to be Market Garden.
All right, and did you participate in Market Garden?
Yes. I was one of the, when we got back to, when we were taken back to England, and they were granted furloughs, and I remember my furlough was to London. I was sick and tired of everything military, and we had such a delightful time coming through Northern Ireland, and I had dated, when we were there, young Colleen Rose Bryson, and I often wondered, well, okay, Rose, she lived in fear of her father, who said, if you ever engage in sex, it'll be the death of you. He never said whether it be in his hands or not. So I always respected Rose and never attempted a thing with her. But I had never really told Rose goodbye, so I went back to Ireland after D-Day to say goodbye to Rose. And she was about my age, and I've often wondered whether Rose Bryson is still alive. I don't know. But we were never intimate in any way. She lived in utter fear of her father.
All right. So did you jump into the action in Operation Market Garden?
Yes, that was a Sunday afternoon, I believe, and the place that we were dropped outside of Nijmegen, and our objective there, the 508, the regiment, was to. There's a bridge at Nijmegen, and there's one. Actually, the one up in Arnhem was the bridge too far, but the one in Nijmegen, we were successful in going into the town of Nijmegen and seizing the control tower that housed the demolition equipment to destroy the bridge, because the British, that was a British sector, and we did capture the one end of the bridge. Now the 504, they had been brought up from, they were not in Normandy, but they were able to paddle across and capture the other end of the bridge at Nijmegen. But then, when the tanks came across and stopped, and Arnhem was only maybe 10 miles farther on, but English countries fight wars differently than America, because if they lose their country. America doesn't know how to lose until Vietnam. So America, always felt very safe with a large ocean, but had that large ocean, the war had gone on much longer, our cities would have been bombed with the V2s. That was one of our goals in Holland, was to overrun the launching sites of the V2s, which were being launched. And I remember seeing them. We see this light starting at the horizon, going on out of sight, and it was coming down on London. And these were the V2s. We remember the V1s. Yes, they were the buzz bombs. And as long as the motor kept running, fine. When that motor stopped, you got out of the way. But the V2s, and I don't know why they never used, although that weapon was not particularly accurate, and I guess because the German army, they were a professional army, they had actually American army, not much training, okay. German soldier was a professional soldier. We were amateurs. But there were enough of us that we did win.
Did you see any type of combat action in Market Garden?
Yes, we did. Well, yes. Okay, we were sent in to capture the location of the demolition for the bridge, and then because the gliders were going to be coming the next day, we were pulled back to secure the drop zone so that the gliders could come in. But I remember Ralph Thomas, who was our first sergeant, and remember, he saved our lives by giving the command, get down and don't move, which if you follow orders, it saves your life, because you attract attention. There was a German plane coming over, and to move would have attracted attention. So that non-com officers, I always respected Ralph Thomas, but actually, non-coms, you respected them anyway. I never wanted to be any higher. I actually was a communications corporal. I never wanted the responsibility of going higher, because if you've seen Saving Private Ryan, you see how being in command of people affects you, and you see this captain going through a mental breakdown, And this is one reason I didn't want to feel responsible for anyone else. And that's why it was my nature not to become attached. In my time in the service, I never felt close to anyone. I didn't permit myself to get close. It's always been my nature not to get close. Without realizing I was a loner.
Why do you think you didn't want to get close to any of your
I
colleagues?
think it was just my nature. I didn't realize. In fact, it was after the war, I didn't realize how much of a conscientious objector I was until I was called for jury duty. And yes, it was a murder case. And I didn't feel that I didn't feel that I should be responsible for determining who lives and who dies. No matter, let someone else make that determination. It's not me. I know that, I don't know. I think these soldiers of whatever army, they have compassion for the soldier, whether it be enemy soldier or whether it be your own. You have compassion because you're living under the same conditions and everything. So that Lyra and I know that that problem came up during World War I, where Christmas time, both sides came out of the troops and sang Christmas carols together, so that you have compassion for your enemy. Yes, we don't like to hate people. Americans it's the nature. I don't know whether I really, after being excused for jury duty, and I never felt, I just didn't feel I had the right to determine who lives and who dies. Some people look on it's a license to kill, but I had compassion for coming back from Holland. I picked off the body of a dead German, a soul book, which was his record of everything. And then a number of years later, and that was a souvenir, a number of years later, I started to think of our prisoners of war and missing in action and the families of these people, and whether they wondered what happened to this dead German soldier. And I felt compassion, and I had a friend of mine who happened to have a cousin in Germany, and I was on a trip back to my ancestral village with my sister, and I took that soul book back to this cousin of my friend and asked him if he would give it to the Red Cross so get it. I had compassion for the family of that. Yes, he was wearing the uniform of the enemy. I sat next to the son of Sepp Dietrich. Now, Sepp Dietrich is involved in the Malmedy massacre. Now, at the time, Sepp Dietrich was a child back in Germany. And yet, he was so proud of his father's uniform. I don't know whether it was a field marshal or what. I felt compassion for Sepp Dietrich. He was a child. You do not hold a child responsible for the sins of the father. And this is my compassion. I know that a lot of Americans, they have difficulty forgiving. Hey, who are our friends today? Who are our friends? Japan and Germany. Who are our friends? And now, Russia? Yes, Putin. I was surprised to learn Putin is a Christian. He is a Christian. Roman Catholic, the Orthodox Catholic Church. So, apparently, oh, well, Because what are we fighting for? Yeah, so, okay. Well, anyway, so I guess the war's been going on ever since the Crusades. And here, we're still fighting a war between Israel, who have finally been able to gain a home of their own after wandering forever. And yet they're fighting a war that if they lose their country. America doesn't know until Vietnam what it is to lose. Because you've got to win. If you're an American, hey, nobody remembers who comes in second. Who comes in second is the leading leader of the losers.
That soul book you were talking about, do you know if that ever made it to the family?
I don't know, but I feel that I justify my conscience. There is a book that is available on Amazon. It is a biography of my time in the service. It is called My Clear Conscience, and it is my feeling of I got through that war with the feeling I never killed anyone.
This is your book?
It is my book. It's available. You pull up Amazon, you pull up George Shenkle, and you see the book, My Clear Conscience. And since my wife and I have been involved with the 4-H movement, we dedicate any profits of that to the 4-H program, so that anybody that buys that book, they are contributing to the 4-H program. And with that, I'm hoping that we enable 4-H kids to get recognition, and particularly kids come in and they go to college, and this affords a good way of the use of funds. I mean, 4-H itself was started back in the early century, whatever, that adults shall be educated by their children, because if the parent can see that the child is being successful, then the adult is educated, and this is the origin of the 4-H program. It's a movement that's worldwide, in every country. In fact, I had the opportunity of telling the 4-H story to a resident who happened to be a doctoral candidate up at Penn State University. He's a resident of Leon. It's one of the countries that is going through this horrible epidemic of Ebola. It is one, well, anyway, but this man is a doctoral candidate up at Penn State University. I forget where I was going with that.
Did you ever get injured while in combat?
Yes, well, in the Battle of the Bulge, we were brought in. We were 2 airborne divisions. The 101st was sent in to control Bastogne, and the 82nd was sent up on the northern perimeter of this bulge, and so we secured the line across the Somme River, and this was to allow American groups to retreat, come back across. Well, and I remember on Christmas Eve of Christmas Eve of '44, where the regiment was split into 2 divisions, and I was a member of the retaining force that held this Somme Chateau. The rest, the other 2/3 were sent back about 10 miles to regroup. See, Montgomery is realigning. He doesn't like. Well, anyway, so we had we were brought back on Christmas Eve, and I remember coming back, and there was only about a 1 mile corridor, and we finally got back to where the rest of the regiment had been taken. But after that, then we had to retake the little village of area, which was, and it was that, but in that, and I remember sticking my head in the door of this building, and I've seen that building, and asking the question, is this building cleared? And I turned, and a shot ran out from the building, and it ran across my shoulder and knocked me down. But the shot, if it had stayed longer, would have gone through my head. It went through the shoulder, but because of that, it was wound. And all night, we had a single jeep taking the wounded off the battlefield. And Lieutenant Paulette asked me, do you want to ride back? And I said, no, I'll walk. I left my Tommy gun there with George Miles, Lieutenant Miles, and he sprayed. Anyway, but yes, I got this wound. I walked back to the aid station, was taken by ambulance to a military hospital in the town of Liège, was flown from Liège to an army hospital in Birmingham, and it took 3 months to get going through replacement depots after having getting patched up to get back to the regiment. But they have been brought back, and I remember, speaking of compassion, I remember I picked up a very valuable knife someplace, and I was proud of it, but I knew I was going back to the 508th, which had been pulled back off the line, and yet when you get wounded, you get fixed up and you're sent back to the outfit. So he was being sent back to his outfit, and I've had compassion for him because I was not going there, and I gave him the knife. I remember that. And that's just where soldiers have compassion for one another. So that's why veterans have compassion. And you ask any veteran, and that's where it comes from. You have faced death together.
You mentioned that your book, My Clear Conscience.
Yes.
And how you felt that you were acting out as being a conscientious objector.
Yes.
Do you think that's in part why you volunteered or decided to do scout work, so you wouldn't really have to actively engage?
Not scout work, but 4-H, yes. I think it drew my wife and I, because of our interest in children. Actually, it was the children that we had, and Dolores and I had 5 children, which led to having 9 grandchildren, which led to great-grandchildren. But anyway, it was the feeling of responsibility for the children that drew us together as a family. It drew us together it held our marriage together. There's responsibility for the children that we were responsible for. So I guess, I don't know, I often wondered why Dolores never questioned me why I brought this picture of a child laying in a crib that I picked up out of someplace in that house in Germany. And she never asked me about that. And yet other women might have. Who is this child? and it was whatever. I had compassion of being a father, and so that when I came out of the service, I was not attached to anyone, and yet I was drawn to Dolores. And I don't know why, but she ended up being an excellent mother of the children we had, and that to me was always the important thing. The mother of the children that we were responsible for bringing forth. That was the most important. I didn't care really. Anything else was unimportant. And that's why I used to resent the holidays, because although Dolores was an excellent cook, but she was a lousy housekeeper. So that to get ready for a party, I had to do the housework.
There's a phrase that says war is hell. Have you heard of that before?
Oh, yeah.
Do you agree?
I think, oh, yes, it is. Yes. I don't know whether it's Sherman, it's Civil War. No, Civil War, I think it is. Whatever, yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's unsettling and doesn't, well, I'm hoping that we're looking for ways to not have wars to settle things. I know that I feel personally that World War II might have been averted there's 100 very important people in Washington, and these are our senators, and these are the people that permit the country to sign treaties. We were never a member of the Versailles Treaty. We were never a member of the League of Nations. And I saw Haile Selassie come pleading with the League of Nations when Mussolini had overrun his country, Italy overrun. And yet, the League of Nations, had America been able to use its influence and stopped Hitler before he started, before he came. Yes, the Versailles Treaty humiliated Germany, yes, and the Allies were determined that they'd be humiliated. Well, as a result of that, the Marshall Plan was the way that the conquest of Germany was held after the Second World War. And mainly, since Marshall had been Pershing's right hand in World War I, with the promise that should we have to go in again, you get the job. Well, so Roosevelt, the president, he had gained such, respect for Marshall. I wouldn't feel comfortable with you out of the country. So it was Marshall that signed Eisenhower's name to lead the European Supreme Commander. But, and then Marshall had to rebuild the army. I mean, we had nothing. In fact, World War I, they took their basic training in France. Pershing wouldn't permit them to go into combat until they had basic training. We had our basic training in Florida. But I don't know. America is basically now today. Okay, we ask youngsters who are willing to volunteer, and yet we don't have a draft. So we ask those that do volunteer, and they end up having to turn 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 tours of duty, risking their lives. Yes, we risked our lives. Yes, we were not relieved. Yes, but everyone was in that. Everyone in the country was in. But, yeah, well, war is hell. Yes, it is.
Did you have any personal experiences of war being hell for you?
Not Not really. I felt fortunate. I was never close enough to being taken prisoner, and I don't know how I would have reacted. I don't know what went through through Funk's mind when he was what was interpreted as surrender, which he was passing his Tommy gun. Yeah, well, he wiped the opposition. He was awarded the Medal of Honor for that. The one Medal of Honor. Well, anyway, I feel fortunate that I never got close to. I don't know. I don't know. You never know what you could do until you had to. Most people do. Sergeant York, he was a pacifist, World War I. He was awarded the Medal of Honor, bringing in I don't know how many prisoners. But anyway, most people, most of our heroes, genuine heroes, they do because they don't know they could. They do because they didn't know they could.
Mm-hmm. That seems to be a theme.
Well, it is the genuine heroes that they do, and well,
speaking of awards, did you receive any awards?
yes. I, as a result of being wounded, I got the Purple Heart, which I'm very proud because, I also had the honor of being one of 6 veterans that were asked to come to Washington and join with President Obama to greet the President of France, Hollande. And I got to shake the hand of President Hollande and President Obama. And later in the same day, President Hollande, he pinned the Medal of Honor, the French Medal of Honor, which was started by Napoleon, but it's been given to many people, and I have a picture of the General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, being awarded the medal that I was awarded by President de Gaulle. So I feel quite honored with this Medal of Honor, and I am indebted to a young woman. I searched, I lost it mislaid. I couldn't find it. It was something and this young woman was able to get a replacement, and I treasure that and regard her. I regard her as an angel. She brought me something that I had foolishly not taken better care of. Yes, I was awarded the Medal. Well, whatever the title, Medal of Honor or whatever, but it is the French Medal of Honor.
And you got that replacement just this weekend, right?
Yes, by this young woman who got this, was so that the original was pinned on my chest by the President of France on that day, and this young lady pinned the replacement ribbon on my chest, and I'm so happy to have it back.
Just as there are, you heard of the book War and Peace.
Oh, yes.
And there's war, and we talk about war being hell. During war, have you witnessed instances in which there was peace, whether it was with an interaction with a civilian, an enemy soldier, a colleague of yours? I mean, you talked a lot about compassion.
Oh, yeah.
Did you see other things that were out of the ordinary in this time of craziness, this time of war and devastation that were enlightening to you?
I know that after the European conflict, and we were fortunate in having been chosen as one of Eisenhower's honor guard, and we were moved into Frankfurt, and I know, yes, this was the enemy, yes, but they were thrown out of their homes. They were thrown out of their apartments, and we took their place, took their apartments. There were 5 of us and whatever. And I had compassion because at the end of our chow line, there had been garbage pans, but you didn't put anything you didn't eat in. There were lines of children with cans welcoming, because it was, you talk about compassion for your enemy, and I had compassion for this getting the soul book back to him, and compassion, yes, compassion. Well, it's something you have compassion for. You learn compassion because if you go to church and become a Christian and you expect to make it into heaven, you better learn to forgive. This is your enemy, whatever. You better, that's the price of admission to heaven. Forgive.
What was your most memorable moment from World War II?
Memorable? Memorable. Yes. Okay, the 82nd, and I've always been proud of the 82nd Airborne Division. It was the All-American Division, the AA. It was formed in World War I, but it was formed by soldiers from every state in the Union, the All-American. And I remember getting out of the service, and the 82nd had been picked to be the division to parade in the Victory Parade down 8th Avenue. Jim Gavin, and I choke up when I think of Jim Gavin. He walked and led that parade. Now I know, okay, but that made me feel so good that I was a part of this group, and I was proud of Jim Gavin, and that's why I don't know. It was an inspiring thing for me anyway, personally, to going back to civilian life and been able to go and see. Jim Gavin became, well, he was our hero. He was our hero, and I've gotten to know his daughters, his granddaughter, but he was well. He eventually became he knew all about Airborne. He was the Airborne expert, and actually he became ambassador to the country of France. And although there was always dispute as to between the 101st and the 82nd, always that dispute as to who was responsible for the first town to be liberated. Who got credit? Well, apparently because the general who was in charge of the 101st spoke French, fluent French. So, and Ridgway did not. He only spoke English. But Ridgway was in charge of the 82nd. And I forget who it was. Taylor, I think it was. Okay. And so Taylor addresses the group. General Ridgway, in French, Ridgway is a very honorable man. Except, words to the effect is the division that liberated the first town in France. And I have proof as to the advertising because of what he had said. Because, well, you believe somebody that's speaking your native language than an American who only speaks well, anyway. But that was so amusing, and it actually, even the advertisements. So actually, it ended up, and I suppose the Ridgway had more power since he was chosen to replace another. He was chosen to replace MacArthur in the Pacific, who couldn't stand his boss, Harry Truman. So he whatever. He was a prima donna. But, in fact, he never had particularly good respect for Eisenhower, because Eisenhower didn't climb the ranks until he later on, but worse the effect that Eisenhower was the best office boy he ever had. I mean, now this is the respect that MacArthur had for Eisenhower. But anyway, so that later on, Eisenhower, and he got the acclaim, but to make up for it, Harry Truman made sure that Marshall was given credit for the Marshall Plan, which made up for the promise that Pershing had given. Of course, the Pattons never had too much. The Patton family had wealth. And they didn't have too much respect for anybody that didn't have it.
You mentioned earlier about that parade in New York. Were you able to attend that?
Yes, I was. And I got an invitation, went back, and it was a thrill to see the 82nd come down 8th Avenue. That was a real thrill. And it's a funny thing. In Europe, you carry a sidearm. You go to town, carry a sidearm. So I went out to see Roger Cavalluso out in Long Island, and I took a sidearm. It's a concealed weapon. Well, anyway, I was never picked up for that, but Cavalluso, he couldn't hack it in civilian life, so he went back into service, and I think he ended up being first sergeant or something or other. But I don't know. Some people find a home in the Army.
So you went to the first parade then? In
Oh,
New York.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. It was the
And
victory
that's your most
parade.
memorable moment from World War II.
Yes, the victory parade. Yes, to me that was the most memorable moment.
Is there anything you would like to add that I haven't asked you today?
Not, I don't think so. I don't think so. I've done a lot of talking, and I hope that some will find interest in what I have to say.
I'm sure they will.
If they're interested in learning more, buy the book, My Clear Conscience. It's available.
Is there anything that you would like to tell future generations? If you had the opportunity now, what would you tell them?
Well, I have had an awful lot of confidence in the youth because, and I think youth get all the discouragement they can stand, but they need encouragement. And I often think of myself that had I had encouragement rather than discouragement, that maybe I might have been able to make better of myself. I at one time had aspirations. Okay, this was back before Frank Sinatra became famous, before Perry Como went on. And I had what was considered a very good voice. Now, I don't know whether I would have been able to get into show business. I don't know. I have no idea. But my voice was respected. And I've always thought that maybe with encouragement I might have been in there too. I know what Sinatra went through. Yeah, he was criticized for his association with the underworld and the whatever. But in fact, well, of course, there's a lot of course, Frank Sinatra, okay, he always did things his way. But that was the way he was. Because he did it my way.
So your message would be encouraged, don't be discouraged.
Well, yes, and I hope that, yes, look for people that lend you encouragement. Look for people that have faith in you, because and I know I'm criticized for my remarks, but America, we dropped the voting age from 21 to 18. This opened up a whole new can of worms of 18 to 21-year-olds voting. And as a result of that, America had its first Roman Catholic president. And we have had our first black president. Okay, now I'll foolishly predict we will soon have our first woman president. Whatever.
So be encouraged.
I don't know. There's got to be something that these 18 to 21s have done something.
Yeah. So they should do it their way.
I know the struggle. I love the struggle that Kennedy had because he's a Roman Catholic. Yeah, you take the words from the Pope. Unless it was the youth that really put him in office. It was the youth, because the youth that put Obama in office. Because who would think we'd have a president of the United States whose mother was white and whose father was black? That is unthinkable. And now, so that I have faith in the younger generation. They have quite often exhibited more good common sense than the older generation. The older generation does things tradition. That's why, although I'm registered Republican, I have yet to vote a straight ticket. Okay? If I know the person, regardless of party, I'll vote them. If I don't know either, this is my philosophy of the way that I vote. I vote every election. If I know neither, and one is a man, and one's a woman, I'll vote for the woman. Mainly, women have not yet earned the reputation of dishonesty. This is my reasoning. I don't know either. I'll take a chance on the woman. I don't know how many voters think of that. I know there are too many voters that vote as their father has dictated. In this house, you'll vote Republican because in this house. We raised our children without that, to think for themselves, without the influence. Too many children. I was a very poorly prepared adult when I went into service. I was out and escaped my father's dominance. And I was anxious to do something on my own. A good many of us were getting away from the parents' dominance. And, well, I don't know. We turned into be Brokaw's greatest generation.
For that, I'd like to thank you.
Well,
Thank you so much, George, for sitting with me today and telling me your story. And thank you for your service.
Well, thank you. I hope that I have given something you can put together in an interesting way, because I was so proud of the job that Adam Berry has done with the biography. My biography is available, and some of the things that I talk about may appear in there. Others are different, and I'm proud of the job that Adam did with my biography. Okay.
Great,
How
thank you.
much time have we occupied?